Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth explainer in our research methodology series titled Types of Research. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because honestly, we are going to look at the very engine of human discovery itself. Now, to really grasp how research shapes our world, I want you to imagine two completely different personalities. Just picture them in your head. On one hand, you have the detective. The detective is driven purely by an insatiable curiosity. They're obsessed with solving mysteries just for the sake of knowing the answer, pulling on a thread just to see where it leads. On the other hand, you have the engineer. Now, the engineer looks at a burning, immediate problem in the real world and urgently wants to build a tool to fix it right now. So you might be wondering, which of these two distinct minds actually built the modern world? Well, the truth is, we owe literally everything to both of them. Today, we're going to explore how both the detective and the engineer operate, and more importantly, how the world as we know it completely, 100% relies on both of them working together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with a clear introduction to what research actually is, and then we're going to jump straight into the realm of our detective, basic research. After that, we'll explore the domain of our engineer, applied research. But we definitely won't stop there. We're going to cross the bridge between them, look at some fascinating research methods that refuse to fit perfectly into either box, and finally wrap up with the beautiful cycle of knowledge. Mentally preparing yourself with this structure is really going to make our deep dive today incredibly efficient.
Section 1. Introduction to Research, the Engine of Human Progress. I want to dispel a huge myth right away. Research is not just about reading dusty books in a forgotten, dimly lit library. It's really not. It is the active, dynamic engine of human progress. At its core, research is a systematic process. It's not random guessing, and it's not just Googling something. It's the systematic investigating of phenomena, acquiring knowledge, and generating insights that actually contribute to science, society, and problem solving. Whether you are an astrophysicist carefully calibrating complex sensors to understand the physics of a distant black hole, or a cognitive psychologist trying to figure out the absolute best way to teach a child to read using phonics, you are relying on this exact same systematic process. This foundational definition is the bedrock of the two massive forces of research we are about to explore.
Section 2. Basic Research, Curiosity, the Realm of the Detective.
So, let's step into the shoes of the detective. This is where pure, unadulterated curiosity reigns supreme. In basic research, which you'll sometimes hear called pure or fundamental research, the goal is simply to answer why and how. The researchers here aren't worrying about creating a shiny new product or fixing an immediate practical crisis. It is highly theoretical and entirely curiosity-driven. Basic research might not solve a problem today, or tomorrow, or even a decade from now, but it lays the crucial groundwork for the future through its long-term utility. Let me give you a really prime example of this detective work in action because it's fascinating. Think back to 1953 in Cambridge. James Watson and Francis Crick discovered the double helix structure of DNA. Now, at the time, they were not trying to cure a specific genetic disease. They weren't trying to build a pharmaceutical drug to sell for billions of dollars. They were acting like pure detectives. They simply wanted to solve the massive puzzle of the fundamental blueprint of life. It was entirely theoretical, yet decades later, that single piece of basic research completely revolutionized the modern world as we know it. I mean, they had absolutely no idea their theoretical work would one day map the entire human genome, or allow forensic scientists to catch criminals using a tiny drop of DNA evidence, or lead to highly targeted cancer therapies and CRISPR gene editing. Without their pure curiosity-driven exploration, modern medical treatments literally wouldn't exist today. Basic research, by its very nature, plays the long game.
Now, basic research generally breaks down into three distinct subtypes. First up, we have descriptive research. This is all about meticulously documenting what is out there in the world. Think of the earliest population censuses. They weren't trying to change society. They simply described the demographics of a country, but that raw data much later formed the basis of incredibly complex sociological theories. Second, there's explanatory research, which is all about finding cause and effect. Think about Isaac Newton. He didn't sit under that apple tree trying to figure out how to build a commercial airplane or launch a GPS satellite. He just saw an apple fall and desperately wanted to explain the underlying mechanical laws of attraction between bodies. He wanted to explain the phenomenon of gravity purely to understand how the universe actually operates. And third, we have exploratory research. This is stepping boldly into the great unknown. Imagine an anthropologist heading deep into the Amazon rainforest to study an uncontacted tribe. They aren't going in with a rigid, predefined hypothesis to test. They are exploring with a totally open mind, asking brand new questions, and creating the initial frameworks that generations of other researchers will eventually build upon.
Section 3. Applied Research, Solutions, the Realm of the Engineer.
But here's the thing. What happens when we don't have decades to wait for an answer? What happens when there is a massive crisis right now, today? When a global pandemic hits or a critical suspension bridge collapses, society doesn't call the detective, society calls the engineer. This is applied research. Where basic research is driven by pure intellectual curiosity, applied research is driven by intense, practical problem solving. Applied research doesn't ask why does this happen in theory, it urgently asks how do we fix this right now? Because of this intense urgency, applied research is highly contextual. You're going to find it taking place in crowded hospitals, inside active factory floors, and within bustling school systems. It generally has a much shorter time horizon, it's highly multidisciplinary, and because it aims for specific, highly usable outcomes, it is very frequently funded by governments, corporations, and nonprofits who are looking for an immediate return on their investment.
There are 4 main subtypes of applied research, and I guarantee these impact your daily life directly. First, action research. This is highly collaborative and immediate. Think of a teacher and a classroom trying out a brand new teaching strategy, gathering real-time data on how the students respond, and then tweaking the lesson plan the very next day. They are actively researching while acting to improve their own methods. Second, evaluation research. This asks the critical, sometimes uncomfortable question, did our intervention actually work? Imagine a government spends $50 million on a massive national campaign to stop teenagers from vaping. Evaluation researchers step in to rigorously measure if that money was completely wasted or if the campaign actually saved lives and lowered addiction rates. Third, experimental development. This is your classic corporate R&D department. It uses existing knowledge to create brand new products, like a pharmaceutical company developing a faster-acting painkiller to take to market. And finally, clinical research. This is the absolutely crucial bridge that brings a theoretical molecule from a sterile laboratory directly to the hospital bedside. Clinical trials rigorously test new treatments on human patients to improve real-world healthcare outcomes.
Section 4. The bridge between them, Pasteur's quadrant. Now, we've reached a really pivotal moment in our explainer. Up until now, we've talked about the detective and the engineer as if they live in totally isolated, separate worlds. But the truth is, they are not enemies. They are essential partners. And this partnership is beautifully captured in the concept of Pasteur's quadrant, which was popularized by Donald Stokes in 1997. He pointed out something brilliant. Research can actually be inspired by both the quest for fundamental, pure understanding and the immediate consideration of practical use at the exact same time. Consider the legendary Louis Pasteur himself in 19th century France. At the time, the French wine and dairy industries were literally collapsing because their products kept spoiling. It was a massive, urgent, and highly practical economic crisis. Pasteur was hired as an applied researcher to fix it, just fix the wine. But in the process of solving this deeply practical problem, he looked closer and discovered microorganisms. He essentially birthed the germ theory of disease. So he solved an applied crisis while simultaneously making one of the most profound theoretical leaps in human history. Basic research builds the deep well of knowledge that applied researchers draw from, and applied researchers constantly discover new mysteries that they hand right back to the basic researchers to solve. Let's trace a step-by-step example of this bridge in modern history because it really puts things into perspective. Back in the 1920s, theoretical physicists were doing purely basic research into quantum mechanics. It was incredibly heavy, abstract, confusing math aimed at understanding how subatomic particles behaved. At the time, most people thought it was useless philosophical meandering with absolutely zero practical value. But then, history shifted. During World War II and the Cold War, the world suddenly developed massive applied needs. There was a desperate, urgent demand for better computing, faster communications, and advanced radar technology. Because that foundational, seemingly useless quantum physics research already existed in the background, a new generation of applied engineers was able to use it to develop semiconductors. And those semiconductors, they are the beating heart of the modern world. The very processor inside the smartphone or computer you are using to watch this explainer right now works simply because an abstract detective 80 years ago wanted to understand a proton. The applied breakthrough was only possible because of the basic research. We actually see this today with climate change, an urgent applied crisis that is drastically accelerating basic theoretical research into atmospheric chemistry and global ecology.
Section 5. Research across boundaries, refusing the box.
Human behavior and the natural world are incredibly complex, and honestly, some research methods simply refuse to be put neatly into a single box. They seamlessly span the boundary between basic and applied. A perfect example of this is longitudinal research. This method involves observing the exact same human subjects over a long period of time, sometimes spanning decades. Imagine following a child's life for 15 whole years. At year 1, researchers are doing baseline observations of infants. By year 5 and year 10, they're tracking deeply complex psychological and developmental milestones as those children navigate preschool and early adolescence.
At year 15, they were looking at outcomes in early adulthood. This single, massive, incredibly patient study provides a rich tapestry of basic theoretical knowledge about how the human brain matures and adapts over time. But simultaneously, all of that data is immediately handed over to local school districts and policymakers to design highly actionable applied preschool programs or teenage mental health interventions. It literally spans the entire spectrum.
Methods can be incredibly fluid. Take correlational research, which investigates statistical relationships without manipulating any variables. After World War II, rates of lung cancer were absolutely skyrocketing, and nobody knew why. Was it the newly paved roads? Was it car exhaust? In 1950, researchers Richard Dahl and Austin Bradford Hills simply played detective with the raw data. They noticed a glaring statistical pattern linking the cancer to smoking. It started as basic observation, just trying to understand a social and biological pattern in the population. But that basic correlation became the immediate foundation for massive, highly applied global public health campaigns, forever changing legislation and advertising around the world. Similarly, comparative research analyzes differences across distinct cultures or government policies. It generates fascinating basic sociological theory about human behavior, for sure, but it also directly informs applied policy design for governments trying to figure out what legal frameworks actually work best in the real world.
Section 6. Conclusion and Next Steps. The Cycle of Knowledge.
As we bring all these concepts together, there is one core truth I want you to walk away with today. Scientific progress is not a linear path. It's not a straight line from A to B. It is a continuous, living, breathing cycle. Basic research is the rich soil that enriches our theoretical frameworks. Applied research is the harvest that ensures this abstract knowledge actually translates into real, tangible benefits for humanity. The boundary between them is porous and constantly shifting. The future of human survival and human thriving completely depends on maintaining this beautiful symbiosis. We must ensure that both the abstract exploration of the detective and the practical problem-solving of the engineer continue to flourish side by side. We honestly cannot survive without both.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. As we look to the future, will humanity's next great breakthrough come from the urgency of solving today's immediate crises, or simply from someone quietly sitting in a lab somewhere, looking at something mundane and just asking why? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me today. If you found this explainer helpful in mapping out the incredible world of research, please hit that like button right now. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on whether you think you are more of a basic, detective, or an applied engineer at heart. Share this with a fellow learner, and absolutely make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next deep dive. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll see you in the next one.